let's talk about why you might already be failing at some of your goals. Because if you can understand 6 key hidden forces that are likely holding you back, you can start to move forward. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. As the year progresses, it's easy to feel like some of those New Year's dreams that you have for yourself could be fading fast. And failure isn't a sign of a lack of effort. Some of the most high performers experience this sense of failure. A lot of the time, it can be more subtle. It has to do with internal forces at play that are keeping you blocked from your potential. So, today I want to spend some time breaking down some of those blocks that could be keeping you stuck, that could be keeping you trapped. And I don't say this from a place as someone who is achieving every single one of my goals this year. I say it from going back to the drawing board and looking at what seems to be working really well in the priorities that I had for this year. And then also looking at why in some other areas I might not be progressing the way that I would like to. And coming back to some of the most powerful concepts that I have learned to rewire my brain to be able to move forward. And one of the first concepts that came to mind was the idea of secondary gain. This psychological concept was something that was first brought to my attention when I was learning more about neurolinguistics programming. It is the idea that there is some sort of hidden benefit that you receive from staying where you are, even when you consciously want to change. So this isn't about laziness. This is about there being a potentially subconscious hidden benefit in keeping you where you are that is serving you in some way. So for example, if you are someone who wants to grow, there could be subconscious benefits for you to stay in your comfort zone because of that feeling of safety that you get from being in that space. Or if you're someone who, for example, wants to increase your visibility, say you want to build a really visible personal brand, but then at the same time, you might be wanting to subconsciously stay where you are because you are worried about how you might be perceived or how you might be judged. Alternatively, you might be someone that is seeking a career change, but you want to stay an expert. You don't want to be seen as a beginner. So you have something to gain out of not making that move. So the idea of secondary gain is not necessarily that it highlights a flaw within you, but it highlights something that you are trying to protect, an identity that you are trying to protect, perhaps. And it also can show you what the true cost of change is. So there could be a reason why you aren't making those moves because you understand that it is going to mean sacrificing other things. And that is the secondary gain that you are getting out of staying where you are. So change doesn't just begin when you decide that there is something that you really want. It begins when you're willing to let go of those older versions of yourself that you have been trying to protect. And this leads me to trap number 2, which is that you are being led by your limiting decisions. Now, this was another favorite concept of mine from NLP, from neurolinguistics programming, where I learned the difference between limiting beliefs and limiting decisions. I know you often hear a lot of discussions around overcoming your limiting beliefs, but what I loved about neurolinguistics programming was that it highlighted that your limiting beliefs are preceded by limiting decisions. So the limiting belief that you now have was a decision that was formed at a specific moment of time. It was likely a really emotionally charged decision. It maybe arose from a moment of rejection or exposure, of failure or loss of control. It was likely something that happened fast and happened early, and now it runs in your mind automatically as a part of your brain's natural survival mechanism, as its protection mechanism to prevent you from experiencing that thing again. So it's something that may have made sense at the time, but now likely governs your behavior in a way that is no longer useful for you. Its usefulness has expired as you have progressed in your life. So instead of being governed by your limiting beliefs, pay attention to the language that you use to rewire your brain. So, for example, avoid speaking in absolutes. So these are phrases like I never or I always. And also avoid identity statements. So I am not someone who. And you can also avoid things like casual links. So if I do X, Y happens. So in general, these sweeping statements that keep you trapped in that limiting belief, in that limiting decision, instead of exploring the opportunities that could be just beyond your current comfort zone. And a really easy way to do a quick sense check when you catch yourself in a limiting belief is to stop and ask yourself, when did I make that decision? The third trap that could be holding you back is that you are stuck in the embarrassment trap. This was something that caught my attention when I read John C. Maxwell's book, Failing Forward, where he goes through the various traps that we have in our life. And this one stood out to me because it was so simple. And it highlighted that deep down, nobody wants to look bad. But I loved his advice related to this because it was just so clear. He said, get over it. Now that leads me to trap number 4, and that is that you could be caught in the spotlight effect. Now, saying to get over your limiting beliefs, your limiting decisions, or your embarrassment trap is a lot easier said than done. But the spotlight effect can help you to shed some light on how it could be easier to reframe the situations that you are in and how much people are potentially judging you. It is a concept in social psychology that says we overestimate how much people notice, remember, or judge us. So we essentially walk around feeling like there is this big spotlight over our head and over our behaviors and our actions, when really everyone else is just thinking about themselves. So we overestimate how much they think about us, and we underestimate how much they're actually just busy with their own lives. So when you're feeling potentially a little bit self-conscious, remind yourself that you're likely overestimating how much people are actually noticing your mistakes. You're likely overestimating how much they recall your behavior, and you're likely also overestimating how harshly they are judging you. The next trap that could be keeping you stuck is that you're not actually failing fast enough. You've likely heard the phrase, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Now, this reminds me of the spaghetti problem, which is something that was developed by the GM of Smart Things at Microsoft. This was an experiment where the participants were challenged to build the tallest structure possible using 20 pieces of spaghetti, 1 meter of tape, 1 piece of string, and 1 marshmallow. And this was an experiment that was conducted over 5 years, and it tested all sorts of professions and all sorts of groups. And that included people like engineers and managers and people with an MBA, for example. But there was one group that outperformed absolutely everyone else, and that was the kindergartners. And as a side note, the MBAs actually came last in that experiment. So what was it that was driving the children's success? It was that they were willing to fail faster. They were willing to just dive in and try stuff. And because they were failing faster, they were also learning quicker. And this idea of failing fast and learning early is also something that is really popular in Silicon Valley, because the quicker you learn, the more you can fail forward and the less costly your learning will be going forward. When you find that you aren't achieving maybe as much as you would like to in a certain area, ask yourself if you are willing to fail in that area. Ask yourself if you are truly diving in and learning from those experiences, or if you are aiming for perfection and as a result, not learning quick enough in that process. And trap number 6 that could be keeping you stuck from what it is that you want to achieve is that you don't really believe that you deserve it. Now, this is a thread that I have seen across a lot of different disciplines and schools of thought. So, everything from the law of attraction to self worth or self perception theory in psychology, to some degree, talks about this idea of actually having to believe in whatever it is that you want to achieve, and that you have to act consistently with that self image. That if something is contradicting your internal identity, then your nervous system is going to try and do everything that it can to protect you. It's going to try and protect you by rejecting the idea, by avoiding the idea, by engaging in self sabotage or under sustaining the thing that it is that you wanted to achieve. This is your brain's attempt at avoiding cognitive dissonance. But it's also much more than simply just not believing that you deserve something. It is your brain holding on to a certain identity. It is your brain actively resisting something that contradicts your identity. So, some of the ways that you might be able to build that muscle for your own self belief is to name that limiting belief, name that limiting decision. So, as we talked about earlier, identify exactly what it is that is potentially holding you back. Then you can also make sure that you are identifying the cost of change. So, what is the cost of not actually acting the way that you would want to? What is the real cost of not changing? And then you can act at the edge of your comfort zone. So, you can take small actions that are going to build that muscle to get closer to the identity that you want to have. So remember that when you feel like you are failing, this isn't all about your lack of motivation or your lack of effort. This could be an opportunity to gather information. This could be a time to collect feedback and understand what could be holding you back so that you can move forward. If you want to learn more about the habits that could be keeping you stuck, then check out my previous series on this topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode.